I'm here with Casey Allen, the founder of the Enterprise Rising Conference. Casey, what is your favorite part about Enterprise Rising?
Here's what I love, Jay. I love it when founders get up on stage and really open up and be really candid and super honest about not just their startup, but about life. When Ben Milne, founder of Dwala out of Des Moines, talks about how he doesn't work a zillion hours a week anymore and how he balances his marriage and his kids, or when David Carandish, the founder and CEO of Jane.ai out of St. Louis, talks about how he turns his phone off one day a week and how he balances all this travel. Or when Rob Walling, founder and CEO of Drip, which he sold, gets up on stage and talks about all of his stresses and anxieties and how he didn't destroy his marriage, even though he might have came close several times. That's the stuff founders really want to hear, and that's the stuff they don't get anywhere. And I really, really love hearing founders talking about that stuff.
How is Enterprise Rising different this year?
If you've ever attended an online event, you know networking sucks. Slack and Discord really just don't cut it. So we have custom built for Enterprise Rising 2020, an online platform that's like Startup Masterclass meets The Sims, where every attendee has an avatar, you're in a building, you're sitting in chairs, you're sitting in couches, you're having real video chats with the people next to you. So what we've done is we've recreated an actual virtual environment where networking happens just like it does in real life.
Casey, when is Enterprise Rising and how can people get involved?
Enterprise Rising is the end of October, the 20th and 21st. It's 2 full days. It's all online, so you can dip in and out for as much or as little as you want. Go to enterpriserising.co. That's enterpriserising.co. And you can use discount code UPSIDE to score 20% off as many tickets as you want. So discount code UPSIDE at enterpriserising.co. All the details are there. The entire conference is online. It's going to be a great time.
I don't look at capital as being like this accomplishment. I see TechCrunch, celebrating equity raises all the time, and all I see is, well, okay, you sold 30% of your company. I hope it ends up worth it, right? Because to me, my stock is the most valuable thing I have, at least monetarily.
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them. Welcome to Upside.
Hello, and welcome to the Upside Podcast, the first podcast finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Eric Hornung, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. Snail Mail himself, Jay Klaus. Jay, when's the last time you got a good old-fashioned letter in the mail?
Maybe your wedding invite? No, I get stuff like that. We're in a season of life where we get a lot of wedding invites. I got a wedding invite from my cousin recently, which doesn't feel like a good time to go to a wedding, to be honest. It was like this September, which I'm just not going to do it. But I like letters. I actually was cleaning out this office that you see around you last weekend, and one of the biggest parts of that was I have like a filing cabinet and a bunch of just like miscellaneous paper stuff that was piled up. But so much of that paper stuff are old, like thank you notes and nice letters that I just can't get rid of.
I think, so I'm reading a lot of presidential biographies right now. I went out of order for a little bit. I went Teddy, then Lincoln, and now I'm back. I did Washington, and I'm working my way through. I'm on Madison right now. And so much of those are based on the correspondence that they wrote through letters to each other. And I think just into the future, are we going to, like when we're looking back on our lives, we're not going to give everyone access to our emails, or maybe we will. And when there's memoirs written, are they going to be written from the perspective of the emails we've sent? I don't know.
Maybe. But the thing is, you wouldn't even need to be your permission to the emails because you're dead. So maybe the people that you wrote them to could grant permission, and people would learn about you through your emails to others, granted by the person who received it.
Oh, that's interesting. It's like, I guess it's the same way it happened back then if they pulled it from your file or someone else's file or papers. But I think it's just it's an interesting way to look at life through the lens of correspondence.
I was listening to that audiobook that you shared with me about Robert Caro, who wrote the biography of Lyndon B. Johnson, and so much of that was also records. So yeah, documents have played a important part in our history and understanding our history and understanding our current and former leaders. And documents, Eric, have been kind of the same for a long time.
Yeah, I think like the biggest innovation in documents was probably, I don't know, fax. And then here we are with email and nothing's changed since.
Hashtag fax about fax.
Hashtag fax.
That's better. That's better. Well, today we are talking with a founder who is setting out to change that once and for all. We're talking with Matt Valeo, the founder and CEO of Documo. Documo is document workflow solutions that make working with documents easy, more secure, and better for the planet. They have 3 separate document products: mSign, which provides legally binding e-signatures on any device; mFax, which is secure cloud fax; and mDrive, cloud storage for workflow critical documents. Eric, I gotta say, looking at Documo's website, it's one of my favorite website designs I've seen in a very long time, which doesn't necessarily have anything to do with documents, but was something that I wanted to call out.
Yeah, that's very nice. I think that Documo sounds like it's got to make your life a lot easier. And speaking of your life, if you want to live the one life you have the best way you can, you should check out our friends at Ethos Wealth Management. You can go to upside.fm/ethos to learn more.
Documo was founded in 2017. They are based in Las Vegas, Nevada, although their team is fully distributed. And Eric, I believe they are bootstrapped to this point.
I love a good bootstrap company, Jay. You know, we had Einar on a bit ago, and he said there's these bootstrap extremists, and I wouldn't put myself in that camp, but the bootstrap movement, I'm all aboard.
What's the bootstrap movement?
So it's bootstrappers who take a little bit of alternative funding to get to boost themselves to the next level. A little ST swap, and all of a sudden, look what you got.
Look what you got. Well, I'm excited to talk with Matt. I love speaking with bootstrappers, or maybe even bootstrappers. Would love to hear your thoughts on this episode as you listen. Did I say episode or episode?
You said episode.
It sounded like episode. You can tweet at us at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm, and we'll get to that conversation with Matt right after this.
Let's bring in Scott Gano, an attorney at Taft, Stettinius & Hollister, to teach us about data privacy and security. Taft is a full-service law firm known for assisting entrepreneurs across the heartland. As a reminder, the following remarks by Taft attorneys are for informational purposes only and are not legal advice. This information is not intended to create, and receipt of it does not constitute an attorney-client relationship. No person or organization should act upon this information without first seeking professional counsel. Scott, we made it through the disclaimer. How are things going?
Things are going great. Thanks for having me.
Scott, thanks for coming on. Always appreciate you being here. If I'm a first-time founder, are there any privacy or data security standards that I should know about?
Absolutely, but it can be a challenge, especially for US-based companies, because unlike a lot of countries around the world, we don't have a universal privacy and security federal law in place that sets standards clearly for all industries. Rather, we tend to handle it in sectors, healthcare sector, financial sector, consumer reporting sector, that each have their individual standards for protecting information, such as HIPAA in the healthcare space. Likewise, we also have the challenges of a global economy, where data is not just coming from the United States anymore. There might be implications for individuals that live in the European Union or Canada or the Asia Pacific region. And as a result, those laws may have different requirements and standards that would govern the use of information. It's for these reasons that, regardless of sector in which you operate, I encourage clients of all sizes to think more broadly and holistically about the standards they seek to implement, and look to things like ISO 27001 series, or maybe the NIST Information Cybersecurity and Privacy Standards and Framework that provide a roadmap for all the things you should be thinking about when it comes to privacy and data security. The benefit of taking such a holistic approach is manyfold. Number one, these standards like ISO and NIST are even recommended by some of these federal regulations. So by following them, you may very well be checking all the boxes with an applicable law. But they're also helpful because they allow one standard across your enterprise that all employees can follow. And that's very important here. It's important to be legally compliant, but you got to be able to operationalize that compliance. And if employees don't understand the policy, get confused by it, or can't implement it universally in the same way across the board for all types of data, the chances of compliance are reduced significantly, and the chances are increased they're going to make a mistake. And when something bad happens, having such a program in place that is holistic with a commercially and industry standard like ISO or NIST in place really puts you in the best position to defend your practices. I always say it's not a sin to have a data breach or even have something bad happen, but it's a sin not to have a plan in place that you at least anticipated the risk and had something in place. So following a universal standard that's out there can definitely help you on many fronts. And I encourage organizations to look at that well before their product hits the market, so they're ready to go, ready to grow, and tackle the opportunities and not just the compliance requirements.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Scott. If people want to learn more about Taft or yourself, where should they go?
We make it easy, taftlaw.com, or you can also find me on LinkedIn.
It's pretty non-traditional, so be forewarned. I actually played poker for a living for about 8.5 years prior to founding Documo, which at the time of its founding was actually called Foiply. But yeah, always been kind of a tech enthusiast, but never really imagined myself working in tech. It's been quite a journey.
All right. Well, tell us more about this 8.5 years in poker. How did you get there?
If we go back a little bit earlier, I actually was in the financial services world, where I started out in the mortgage business at 19 years old. At 21, I got my Series 7 and 63 stockbroker's license. And that's where I kind of made my way east to New York to kind of pursue the Wall Street dream. I figured out pretty quickly that it was just not a long-term fit for me. So I had to kind of look for the next chapter. Well, lucky for me, the decision was kind of made for me in 2008 when financial ruin was being wrought upon the world. And, I quit my job, and there wasn't really ample opportunities to kind of re-enter that world. So I had to kind of figure out what I was going to do. So I had been playing poker since 2004, not professionally or anything, just kind of as a hobby. And, by 2008, I was playing pretty regularly online. And so I was playing online, kind of looking for work, and that turned into 8 years is what ended up happening. So, yeah, so fast forward, I was kind of looking for my next chapter, and I had moved to San Diego after Black Friday, which, if you don't know, in the poker world is kind of when U.S. regulators shut down online poker in the United States. And so I kind of transitioned from being an online player to a live player, and was kind of, just looking for the next chapter, but wasn't really seeing it was really tough for me to envision going back to kind of a 9-to-5 corporate job after having that kind of freedom for so long. Got introduced to somebody in San Diego in the tech world. It was actually in the document space, and kind of got introduced to this problem that Documo is now trying to solve, and just decided to kind of go for it. Didn't really know what I was getting myself into. If I did know like what the first 2 years would be like, I probably wouldn't have done it, but I'm very glad that I did now.
I can't resist asking just at least one more question on this poker space, because it's something that's totally unknown to me. Living as a professional poker player essentially for 8 years, how did you think about that as someone who clearly has some business acumen? Like, what does planning for cash flow look like in a world where you're playing poker professionally? How do you think about like what is good enough? How much I need to play? Like, I just don't even know what the considerations are.
Yeah, it's very similar to running a business, actually. Your tool is money, right? That's the tool you need to go out and make more money, similar to a business. And people think of poker players and they think of these like people that are sitting there and like reading into people's souls and stuff like that, when the reality of most successful poker players, it really comes down to discipline and money management. So kind of understanding what edge you can get in any given game scenario that you're faced, and how to extrapolate that edge over a larger sample size. So it's actually really boring, because most of the time you're sitting there just taking a very disciplined mathematical approach to, the hand ranges you're willing to play, and kind of figuring out what types of ranges your opponents are willing to play, and, basically just waiting for those kind of exploitative scenarios. And it's very time consuming. You can't click a button and just like get rich. You're really just extrapolating a relatively small edge, actually, when it really boils down to it. and you're trying to get as much hand volume in as possible. So money management is extremely important because you're going to take swings. You're going to, we call it variance. Outsiders call it luck. Variance, it's all the same, right? It's basically the variables that are outside of your control, and to a certain degree, the outcomes are outside of your control. But good decision making over time, will result in a win, and that's it's similar to trading the stock market or running a business. Yeah, I could spend quite a bit of time on it. I considered writing a book on it actually, but decided to point my energy at something more productive for more people than myself.
How did you use those skills, which are like the difference between 51% wins and 49% wins? It feels so minute compared to starting a business where things are going from 0 to 1, just on a pure mathematical basis. How did you use kind of your thin edge skills to launch a business?
Well, I don't know if that particular aspect of it was very useful, but there was a lot of things that were very useful, like money management, taking a very kind of fiscally conservative approach to spending and starting the company. I didn't come from the Silicon Valley world. In fact, I had no real exposure to venture capital or any of that. So, to me, starting and building a business was you either build or you buy something for 20 cents and you sell it for $1, right? And so there's obviously some upfront capital expenditure that goes into, like you said, going from that 0 to 1. And so, I just kind of modeled the whole thing out, very similar to like you manage your poker bankroll, right? If you want to make a certain amount of money in poker, you basically have to figure out what stakes you need to play, what your win rate at those stakes is going to be, and then you need to figure out what is a reasonable bankroll that you're going to need to be able to withstand variance and do it over an extended period of time, right? And so when I looked at starting a company, it was a very similar exercise. I was looking at, okay, what is it going to cost me to get a website up? What is it going to cost me to build an MVP of a product, to get an initial customer set to give me feedback on whether this is working or not? What do I need to, feed my family? How much time is it going to take? It was the exact same exercise from that perspective. And so, and that's exactly what I did. Is I got a very lean MVP up and out the door. I started collecting customer feedback. And this was, I had no thoughts to hire anybody or to raise capital during this period of time. It was really just, I wanted to prove a thesis, right? And then once I had done that, I went out and started looking for angel funding. This was 2 years from the time I incorporated the business and started working on it. I was still playing poker, to support my family. And then, once I was at about 12K MRR, that's when it finally occurred to me to say, okay, maybe I can turn this from a project into a real company.
So before we get into that, which, holy cow, already I'm thinking like 12K MRR after just doing this on the side. That's awesome. How can I have one of those? You said that you moved to San Diego and someone introduced you to this document problem. So tell us more about that moment and what drew you in about that, because on its face doesn't sound like the sexiest problem to solve.
No, it doesn't. That's actually what really appealed to me, though, to actually, take a crack at it myself. So I had moved my family to San Diego. This was just kind of on a whim, and wanted somewhere to go. We wanted good weather. San Diego seemed as good a spot as any. And I actually, just by pure happenstance, met a gentleman who actually owned a small technology company in the document space. And just kind of getting to know him and getting to know his business, I had some very kind of long conversations with him and started kind of bouncing ideas off of him. And he came back and said, he really likes how I think, and it'd be cool if I could contribute to the business in some way. And I basically told him, hey, I am not really a 9-to-5 like kind of worker bee kind of guy. I'm happy to kind of contribute or find a way to add value. But if we're talking about like just like a full-blown work engagement, that probably is not for me. Luckily, he came back and he basically said, no, hey, like we can do this thing on your terms. We just kind of need some of these fresh ideas. So that's how I got introduced to this space, was kind of through this consulting work, which is funny, right? Because I didn't have any background, so I didn't really know, like I had no resume to offer to say, hey, this is how I'm qualified. It was just really just like bouncing ideas over beers. But it was great because it kind of pulled me into this world and got me to really start thinking about some of these use cases and all the kind of problems that all the archaic processes, I should say, that these companies are still implementing on a day-to-day basis for mission critical documents. And we're talking about healthcare organizations, government entities, banks that are having to move millions or billions of documents that have a lot of times very sensitive, information, and they're doing it in a way that is basically designed to fail. It's very old processes. So there's a lot of kind of pain points and things that I think technology could make better. I decided to kind of just pick one of them to go and work on it. And fax, to me, again, not sexy at all by any stretch of the imagination, but it's actually a multi-billion-dollar industry with a double-digit CAGR, and I didn't really see any innovation coming into the space. So a lot of people, they hear the buzzwords, augmented reality or AI or machine learning. They say, well, that's cool, I can go raise money on that idea. I wanted to go after an industry where 1,000 new startups weren't coming out of YC all trying to solve the same problem, right? I wanted to go in an industry where the incumbents were asleep at the wheel, and that's what I did.
When you were thinking about, okay, I have all of these problems, I found all this stuff through this consulting, I learned about these use cases, how did you narrow it down to this is the specific problem I want to solve? And were there others that were kind of competing for your focus?
Well, I was just as shocked as any kind of person my age would be in 2020 that it, is not in these industries, that fax is even still a thing, like totally shocked, like I couldn't believe it. And so out of curiosity, I really started digging in to like, why does this protocol still exist? Why is it still a thing? And the more I uncovered and the deeper I dug, the more I realized that there was just like, it was very obvious to me that there was a very big opportunity here for a company to come in, build innovative technology, and help these companies that are kind of stuck using this ancient protocol. I looked at it as kind of lowest hanging fruit, that this was like a very obvious problem in a space that nobody was really paying attention to. I got excited about it. I mean, as weird as that sounds, I was researching and kind of digging in. I started looking at the existing solutions. Every time I'd open a new solution, I'd be like, oh my God, like how this is horrible. This UI experience is terrible. These solutions look like they were built in 1995. Like they're and I got excited. I'm like, geez, like it wouldn't be that big of a stretch even for someone like me without the background and experience to come up with a better solution. So I kind of took that better mousetrap thesis and started drawing up a game plan to take something to market.
I am fascinated to know what you learned about this, because I agree. Every time I see a fax number on something, I think, how is that still a thing? And to me, even just email in a lot of ways is a solution for fax. But I'd love to hear from someone who's really dug into this. What keeps faxing around? What do people use it for that it just needs to remain in place?
Yeah, so it's a few things. So the companies that are really still using it are basically companies in the regulated industries here in the US. It's still being used internationally, but in the US, it's particularly a big problem because when you look at healthcare, government, legal entities, financial entities, they're all kind of wrapped in these regulations, and they are not able to send PHI in the healthcare space or anything that's covered kind of by a information security regulation by email, right? And there are other technologies that can be used to transport a document from A to B. The thing about fax is it's the least common denominator. Everybody basically has a fax number, and you have this kind of chicken and egg problem where, are there better technologies? Sure. Can you get everybody in all these industries to simultaneously agree on one of those technologies so that they can begin transacting with each other? Well, very clearly the answer is no, because it hasn't happened. So, fax is here for the foreseeable future for that reason. And like I said, it's actually growing. Fax volume is actually growing year over year, believe it or not. And so, it's one of these things where, these companies kind of refuse to let it go. And because of that, there's an opportunity to go in and say, well, for whatever reason, you're not going to let this technology go, but it doesn't have to be painful, right? You can wrap it in an API. You can put a great user experience, a web interface in front of it. You can create other cool modern tools like webhooks or integrations with EMR platforms or mobile channels. You can do all these things on top of this protocol. And these things just weren't being done at a very good velocity. And so, Documo came along and built a great product in a short amount of time. We're number one rated on G2 Crowd and Capterra, and we've grown 217% in the last 13 months. So
you mentioned that the first couple of years were really painful. So what did the first couple years look like, and why was that so painful?
Yeah, well, it was tough because in the very beginning, I was by myself. I didn't really have any kind of playbook or mentorship to go off of. I still needed to earn a living, so I was bouncing between a poker table and travel and kind of working on this project on my laptop. And every time I would make one step, I would run into five new problems, right? Like, and I'd have to teach myself these problems, and so like any entrepreneur's journey who doesn't just like wake up one day with millions of dollars of funding, it's tough. And I don't know if my experience is that unique compared to anybody starting a company. I mean, the reality is building a company is hard. It's very hard. There's an inherent barrier there that it just takes a certain kind of person and a certain amount of willpower and a certain amount of focus and drive and dedication. The willingness to roll up one's sleeves and get to work. And it's tough. And I think that's going to be the case for most likely any startup, right? And some of your initial theses are going to be wrong, right? You have to be willing to get proven wrong. I think that's why a lot of startups fail is they have a thesis and they refuse to get proven wrong until the company dies. Whereas I love to get proven wrong. I love for a customer to tell me something that where I had an idea about it, but then the actual customer says, no, this is actually my pain point, and then I go and solve the customer's problem. So it takes time to kind of get that critical mass. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of I moved my family from San Diego to Vegas for that reason. Actually, was to cut my cost of living, because the more hours that I started putting into the business, the less hours I had to play poker, and therefore the less income I had, because I didn't take a salary from the company for almost 3 years. So had to figure out how to make it work.
You must have been pretty good at poker.
I was okay.
You mentioned when you first started this, it was called Foiply. And I'm looking at your LinkedIn, and it says Foiply was from 2015 to 2016 when Documo started. What was the rebrand? Was it like a big structural change in the business, or was it just a rebrand, and why?
It was mostly a rebrand, although there was a structural change. Well, so Foiply is a play on FOIP, fax over IP, right? So similar to VoIP is the fax version of voice over IP. And so I was looking for kind of a short .com name that was related to the product. But as I started building this product, my vision continued to grow and grow and grow. And in 2016 is when I decided this wasn't just going to be, a fax product. This was going to be a company that's really trying to solve document workflows, multiple use cases, multiple products. I wanted to build a suite of products. And so I decided Foiply wasn't the best name for the company anymore. So I bought Documo.com. At this point in 2016, I actually also brought in Matt Schultz, who's our COO and also a former professional poker player. I met him playing poker. He played poker for about 6 years for a living, and brought him into the company to kind of help me turn this from a project to a company. And then in 2017, that's when we set out to raise a little bit of funding to kind of get us to the next level.
You mentioned earlier you're not from the Silicon Valley background. You don't have millions of dollars, but you've started going down the path of raising funding. Do you think that this is turned from, okay, we're going to bootstrap, we're going to get this thing to however much ARR makes sense? Or are you thinking, as you look forward, this is going to be more of the blitz scale, we're going to go seed A, B, C, D, and really scale this thing to your full vision? What does it look like for you?
We don't have plans to go kind of the standard venture route. We did raise some funding, but we've raised under $500,000 in total equity capital to date. We did 244,000 in revenue last month. Like I said, up 217% since July 2019, which, so that puts us at about a $3 million run rate. We're profitable. We're growing fast, as I just mentioned. And I don't want to close the door entirely on ever raising equity capital again, but we're only going to raise capital if either A, we need it, or B, we see enough of a delta between, the bringing in the capital leverage and doing whatever we're already doing. What we're not willing to do is we're not willing to cede control of the company. We're not willing to sacrifice our culture or how we do things. We have an amazing team of very talented people all over the world. And yeah, I don't look at capital as being like this accomplishment. I see TechCrunch, celebrating equity raises all the time, and all I see is, well, okay, you sold 30% of your company. I hope it ends up worth it, right? Because to me, my stock is the most valuable thing I have, at least monetarily. So I am not going to give it up easily, and I'm certainly not going to give it up if I don't have to. That's how we're approaching it for this business, and I think there are other businesses out there, like a SaaS company that has 85% gross margins profitable. My opinion is grow that to the moon. Why sell any equity, right? If you don't have to. There are businesses that maybe are a better fit for venture capital, and it might make more sense to kind of do a land grab or scale really, really fast. I am working on some other projects where I think VC might be the right fit. But for Documo, yeah, I'm we're kind of playing it by ear, and we'll scale and run fast if it makes sense. But I mean, the partnership has to be, there has to be total alignment. A lot of things have to go right for me to feel like raising from VCs at this point is a good idea.
Take me back to your customer. You mentioned regulated industries. When I think about highly regulated industries, I think generally slow adopters, long sales funnels, high customization, integration costs. How did you break in and kind of find your niche? And then what's that niche look like today?
Well, in the early days, I didn't have enough of a product to even be really able to sell into these larger entities. They have security requirements. They want you to provide an SLA and do all these things, and like I just wasn't equipped to do that. So what I wanted to do though is I wanted to get some customers. So really, it was an SMB product on day one. Somebody, whether a small clinic or real estate agent, someone in these industries. I did want to make sure I was going after the right industries that I was going to be selling into, but I wasn't able to go and sell to very big companies. Luckily, it dawned on me fairly early that I was going to need to make this product more enterprise ready if it was ever going to be anything more than a micro SaaS company. So I immediately started working on really trying to understand the problem from the IT administrator's point of view. And we built kind of a very robust administrative feature set, reporting, compliance, and really, really based the product on this idea, even though it wasn't ready to sell to those people on day one. I basically was selling to SMB while simultaneously figuring out how to get the product ready to kind of go to bigger companies. And so it's been kind of a cool journey to watch in that we have continually just kind of moved up market, right? We started hitting kind of mid-market, and now we're kind of hitting enterprises. And the reception is great because every time we go into those markets, we've already kind of been iterating for those markets for 6 to 12 months prior to actually getting the interest. So it hasn't been the fastest journey, but I think it's been the right journey for us in our culture.
Something that I had a little bit of experience with in the healthcare space. We knew it was like an antiquated industry. We wanted to build a product for it. But because it was clear that it was like this antiquated legacy, like gross industry that hadn't been innovated on, the people in that space had been peppered with people who were trying. And so it was really hard to get their attention in the beginning because like, oh, here's just another one of these. We'll probably run into the same issues that we ran into with the last 10 vendors who tried this. Was that a similar experience with fax technology or document technology?
Yeah, to some degree, for sure. These industries have a lot of kind of similarities in that regard. There's a lot of startups, especially in the healthcare space, and also, I mean, there's tons and tons of software companies that are trying to sell to law firms, for example, these niche kind of software products, and to some degree, you run into that. The good thing about fax is it was a very real pain point, and although there have been kind of these cloud fax vendors around for a while, because that pain is real and it's something that it's hitting them every day. If you can build the right inbound marketing funnel so that when the person starts thinking about it, you kind of lead them to you, show them how you solve the problem. It really tends to shorten those sales cycles and really gives us a good opportunity to win that business. Now, as we launch new products, that's not always going to be the case. Like we're launching an e-signature product and there's a lot of solutions that are not horrible. So, it's going to be kind of a different, you may have more of an educational element. You may have a longer sales cycle at the enterprise level. You may have, some of these other challenges, but I've learned so much in kind of taking this product to market and penetrating kind of these legacy verticals that I feel very confident in my ability to just continually get better, and the company to continually get better at both delivering a product, selling the product, supporting a product. It's fun. It's the challenge is there, but it gets funner as you grow.
And if I'm reading between the lines, it sounds like you were coding this yourself.
Yeah, the first version was me, and luckily, as I got a little bit of traction, I was able to hire much more skilled developers to build better versions of the product.
Did you have a background in that before you started Foiply, or did you teach yourself to code so you could build it?
No, everything is self-taught. Self-taught piano, self-taught poker, self-taught coder, self-taught parent. I love learning. I love learning new things. I always kind of have this insatiable thirst for knowledge, and so it's always exciting when I can go and build a new skill set.
Real quick, before we dive deeper into this, I would love for you just to kind of lay out, because we haven't hit on it explicitly. Can you lay out the breadth of what Documo is today?
Yeah, so well, I told you we're about a $3 million run rate, and that's largely entirely from our mFax product line. We have two new products. We have mDrive, which is a secure document storage product, and we have mSign, which is a secure electronic signature product that we're bringing to market here in the next 30 days. So now we'll have a suite of 3 products that are deeply integrated with each other, with a focus on the regulated industries, and we have a very aggressive product roadmap. Our goal is to launch a new product every 18 months and to eventually have an end-to-end document and automated workflow solution where people can work with a document from its inception all the way to the point, to the various transactional layers or whatever that document is meant for, right? Every document has a life cycle. There's a purpose for that document being created, and typically it has multiple touch points from the time it gets created to the time it gets, archived and maybe later retrieved. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to really deeply understand the life cycle and use cases of why people are still putting information onto pieces of paper. And we're trying to digitize these processes and automate and reduce kind of human error, reduce security risk, and ultimately save these companies a lot of time and money and how they deal with documents. So we're still very, very early in that journey, I think, but that's kind of the big vision behind the company.
How does a core potential decision maker, how does someone hear about Documo?
Mostly through an inbound marketing funnel. Right. So an IT administrator somewhere is saying, I'm fed up with this legacy fax server I'm dealing with. So they go out to look for a solution. Luckily, our customers have been great about singing our praises in the digital world. So places like G2 Crowd and Capterra, they've rated us as one of the top solutions. So we can now be found. We also have a fantastic head of growth that we brought into the company in December, who's been kind of going and penetrating new channels, working on SEO, working on a content strategy. So most of it's just inbound and referrals. Although as we launch our new products and as we kind of expand our content footprint, we intend to kind of be a little bit more visible through display advertising, social networks. We plan to be more active in those channels to kind of build that brand awareness and have a bigger reach.
Something else we talked about during my, again, very brief time in healthcare was because we had to protect HIPAA type information, if there was a breach, the fines for that basically run a small company out of business. We called it a WIFIO problem, where effed it's over. So how have you worked through being compliant in this way? Because being self-taught, I'm sure there's a lot here that you're learning for the first time with very, very high stakes.
Yeah. So, basically when I was working on the MVP of the product and getting some initial traction, one of the most common things I would run into is people would ask, are you HIPAA compliant? And it became obvious to me very quick that if I was going to sell this product into the healthcare space, I would need to figure out a way to become HIPAA compliant. So that meant reading through this act in its entirety and the rules surrounding it, and looking at other HIPAA compliant solutions, trying to figure out what vendors they were utilizing, trying to figure out, how did they go about doing it, and then same thing, drawing up the game plan. And you have to make a decision. Like, do we want to sell into these verticals, or is this just going to be kind of too much liability, too much pressure on a small startup? And I decided that it would be worth it. And healthcare today represents about 35% of our user base, so which is our largest vertical. So a lot of work, a lot of treading lightly, and also investing in the right vendors and the right processes. And Yeah, I mean, it's something that we're still trying to solve today. I mean, we're actually in the process right now of going through our SOC 2 Type 2 audit, which is, very expensive, very time consuming, but in the end, we think it's a good investment.
Why do customers churn off of Documo?
They don't much. We have net negative churn. If someone is spending a minimum of $50 a month with us, they churn under 1%. So it's I think the best metrics of our business that says is this a viable company that can grow to be big? Revenue growth is great. I think headcount is kind of a vanity metric, but customer churn I think is a very real, very sustainable metric.
When you're looking at your kind of three products now, is the fax product like your opening wedge? Does that get you in the door to the other two products? Or how does that work?
Well, it does today because that's our only paid product. So, we have about 1,200 or so, approaching 1,300 paying accounts, about 30,000 users. And so it's great when we launch these new products in the next 30 days because we have a enthusiastic customer base that knows us, trusts us, knows what kind of support we provide, knows what kind of product we deliver that we can go and sell into. And we have an immediate opportunity to cross sell and expand our ARPA. That being said, we still have to figure out how to go and get new customers. But the good news is we've taken a modular and kind of segmented approach to the products. They all live within the same platform. So the idea is, simplicity, ease of use, and moving from one product to the next. But they all have their own marketing sites and domains which can then feed each other. So for example, if somebody is looking for an e-signature solution, we're not going to drive them to the Documo website and say, here's kind of all these products. I think it's too much. So we drive them to the mSign website. We say, here it is, easy to use e-signatures. So that person has demonstrated an interest in one product. We pull them into the platform and we show them the value of perhaps adding another product and then another. It's a strategy that we're taking that we think is going to work pretty well because one, we have a customer base to sell the products to right away. Two is we don't have to be one thing for everybody or have a very kind of confusing message with saying, hey, here's all these products in one. We can drive people into the product that they're looking for and build a relationship over time.
Real quick question. Where's the M come from? And mFax, mSign? What's M mean?
The E was already taken.
Ah.
It stands for Matt. It stands for Matt, doesn't it?
Well, so that's kind of the Easter egg is, the two kind of principals in the company are me, myself, Matt Valeo, and the other's Matt Schultz. And so, we were looking to rebrand. We started for a very short time, we had this domain that was called Move. And it was like we move documents, but it was a .io and it was a misspelled version of move. And so we decided, like, you know what, let's find a .com. So I found Documo.com and we're like, okay, what should we call the products, right? Do we just say that they're fax and sign or whatever? No, that's lame. Then we decided to kind of highlight the M in Documo and say like, let's just call everything M this, M this, M that. And so yeah, I mean, it's just kind of how it all worked out. And the Easter egg in there is Matt and Matt built the M products.
Love it. We're cracking the code here. So it seems to me that theoretically, since these products are supposed to help people move documents from person A to person B, it seems like if person A loves mFax and they're trying to send something to person B who doesn't have it, there's an inherent network effect where they're going to try to push that person to get on the platform. Is that true, or is that an issue where someone says, well, I can't use this because this other party doesn't have it?
Well, it's not the last part of your statement is not true because that's kind of the least common denominator thing I told you about fax is if somebody is faxing on one end and they're faxing on the other end, one end could be an old fax machine transmitting at 8600 baud, and the other end could be a fax server, a write fax server, or it could be a cloud fax service, or it could be another fax machine, and it doesn't really matter as long as both ends are speaking the same language, similar to SMTP protocol, right? Like if you're using, Gmail and the other person is using their own email server or whatever, like they're both talking the same protocol. It doesn't really matter, right? So that's the same is true in fax. Although on one end, one person might have a very good experience, and the other end, one person might have a very bad experience because of whatever medium they're using, right? So you don't really have that problem where you can't sell it or to someone because they need the other person to be on the same thing. But you do have an opportunity for network effect, and we're just at the very early stages of exploring that. One thing that we've never done with our product is we've never like put any advertising on the cover page or done something like that. So we're trying to figure out ways to kind of very gently and unobtrusively help get people to help us advertise in that way. So we're kind of experimenting one with like a freemium version of the product where we may have like an advertisement on the cover page. They can use it for free, but with that kind of caveat, we're also kind of experimenting with other ways to kind of build those network effects, but we're in the very early stages of that.
Earlier on in the conversation, you mentioned culture a few times. How would you define the Documo culture?
Awesome.
Well, that was the easiest answer.
No, I'll expand on it. I mean, I have been an advocate of remote work since the inception of this company. It was funny. It's funny because a few years ago when I was out pitching angel investors and when I tell them we were fully distributed, I mean, they could not wrap their minds around like, how can the CEO not be where the employees are? How can you bond? How can you, I can't be helpful to you unless you're in Silicon Valley. And I'm like, really, dude? Like the internet's been here for a while. Are you literally gonna just be like coming on over and talking to me face to face every time we talk? Like I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that they thought this way, and they apparently couldn't wrap their head around building a really great distributed team. Although I pointed out to them that there are other people that have done it. You look at Buffer, you look at InVision, Zapier, GitLab. People are proving this out constantly. But I knew early on that if I was going to do this, I needed to be very intentional about it, right? I needed to make sure that there was an environment of collaboration. Everybody feels like they have a voice, can make an impact. Basically, all the things that in my mind I thought were wrong with kind of corporate environments, I wanted to do the exact opposite. So that's how we've built our team, and it's worked out pretty well. I mean, we don't have employee turnover. Everybody is happy, enthusiastic, incredibly talented. And it's just, I one of my biggest worries is that we will lose this at scale or lose some part of it. So, I'm at least making an effort to make sure that culture is a focus when we onboard, when we hire, and when we look for candidates. And I'd like to keep this hopefully forever, but if not, as long as possible.
Why are you worried that you're going to lose some or all of that?
Well, it's tougher. It's tougher when you have a small team. It's much easier to be tight knit. Like I can personally talk to everybody, spend time with everybody. I believe small teams are very much a reflection of the CEO or leadership team. They tend to kind of pull how they think about product, how they think about customers directly from that executive team. But at scale, that's not always the case. It's the executive team moves more towards a delegation role, and so now you have multiple layers between the executive team and new people getting onboarded. You can't realistically spend time every day with 200 people, right? It's not a realistic thing that you can do. So I'm not saying that larger companies can't have great cultures. I believe, when I look, Buffer I think is 85 people. GitLab is I'm sure in the hundreds now. I don't know how many people they are, but I'm sure there's several hundred people, and they reportedly have a very strong culture. So I know that there's a way to do it. I just think it's going to be a little more challenging. So I don't know if my worry will play out that way, but it is a concern of mine for those reasons.
At this point in the business's lifespan or life cycle, just about to launch, this new offering, seems like the product suite is growing and MRR is growing. What is the grand vision that you have for Documo? Like, what is the ultimate win if everything goes according to plan?
For me, if we can solve a real problem and make some kind of positive impact out in the world, by solving that problem, and at the same time build a company that has an inclusive culture, is a great place to work, to me that'll be a win, regardless of what revenue figures or exit outcome or anything else. It's being able to feel good about what you're doing, that you built something of value. That to me is what fuels me every day. And so it's become addictive since I kind of became an entrepreneur. I have 2 other companies I'm working on right now, in addition to being the CEO of Documo. But that sense of fulfillment you get from doing those things is highly addictive to me, and would equate to a win to me.
How do you think about spending your time and your focus when you're working on so many things?
It's tough. I mean, I very much have that pull to constantly be solving a problem or working on something exciting and interesting. I'll be honest, I've slept very little in the last 6 years or so. I found myself working at 3, 4 in the morning constantly. I find myself, working 100-hour weeks or 7 days a week constantly. It's tough to find that. It's tough to really find a very good balance, just because I'm one of those people that kind of constantly feels the need to be productive, to be doing something, to get that kind of mental stimulation. Deep down, I kind of hope that over time, it won't always be this way, but I feel like I'm in kind of the prime of my working years. So, until I find kind of a better solution for balancing kind of that work-life balance or health or whatever it is, I'm just going to continue to push and hopefully good things will come of it.
If Dropbox or DocuSign offered you $30 million today for Documo, would you say yes?
No, that's a wildly low valuation. HelloSign, Dropbox bought HelloSign just last year for $230 million, and they're at a scale not too much bigger than we are right now. DocuSign trades at 40 billion in the public markets, and they're an okay product, really, with one product. So, it's not about the money or the big numbers or anything like that, but I would be doing a disservice to our shareholders if I were to even consider an offer like that.
Is there anything that we haven't asked here about Documo that you feel like we should have asked?
Let's see, what did we cover? Stage, team, culture, problem we're solving. I don't think so. I think your audience will have a pretty good insight into myself personally and the company.
Well, I love interviews like this, especially founders that are on the end of bootstrapping, because you are voluntarily giving us numbers that usually we have to ask for, and usually people are pretty guarded about, because you're like, this is what we're doing and we're crushing it, and here's why it's great, and I love that. So thanks for sharing all that.
Well, again, like I don't come from this mindset. I mean, if a competitor come and asks us for our numbers, I'm going to tell them too, and I have, because we've had 2 large public companies inquire about acquisitions just in the last couple of months, and I tell them straight up, well, I'll tell you everything you want to know, because I don't feel threatened by you, and we play in a big enough market where there's always going to be multiple players. No one is going to own this entire market. You're welcome to try, but I feel very good about my chances to continue to gain market share. And when I tell them that, they're like, at first they're like a little bit like, what? And then, they're like, yeah, okay, you're right. It's fine. I mean, you can just by looking at any given company and their web traffic, you can kind of guess what size they are anyway. Like, there's no sense in pretending to be bigger than you are or smaller than you are or whatever. Like, it is what it is. Let your product and your service do the talking.
Well, if people want to learn more about you or Documo after the show, where should they go?
Well, you can DM me or follow me at Phenomenally on Twitter. I also write a little bit on Medium. You can just look for my name. You look for, our company website will lead you to all the product websites, Documo.com. Yeah, and I'm working on some new projects. One of them's incognito right now, but I'm going to be putting out a website very soon, actually, probably in the next week or two. The product I'm particularly excited about, and I'll be writing about it and kind of putting it out there very soon.
All right, Eric, we just talked with Matt Valeo of Documo. We got a little bit into the world of professional poker again. How does this keep happening?
This podcast is really just a poker podcast hidden by startups. We have a great poker face.
It's a where are they now of professional poker players.
Yeah. What if that was actually the hidden message behind Upside the entire time?
Our whole thesis with this show is that the greatest founders and investors are actually former professional poker players.
And they all live outside of San Francisco.
8.5 years, though. Can you imagine that your job for 8.5 years is just being really good at poker?
I can't imagine doing anything for 8.5 years.
That's a good point.
What have you ever done in your life for 8.5 years that isn't like live?
Or school.
Well, no. School changed, I guess maybe.
But I mean, if you
K through 8?
Yeah. I mean, like K through 8, but also I feel like high school through undergrad, like...
You thought those were the same experience? I feel so bad for you.
No, point being, there's nothing that I've done for 8.5 years.
Is there anything that you've grown 217% in 13 months, though? That's the question.
Maybe my calorie intake.
You're looking svelte.
Okay, I appreciate that. Well, Eric, this is a space that I would not call sexy by any means, but we love that. We love that here. We love the innovating in spaces that no one is paying much attention to. And, as I said a little bit in the interview, I looked around at faxes, especially in the healthcare space, for about a year, and I was like, I can't believe this is the way things are being done. So it's good to see that someone's breaking in and having a lot more success than I did.
One of the things that I love when we get on Upside is just something on the fringes of entrepreneurship. And it seemed like so much of this interview and so much of what Matt is building at Documo is like on theme with kind of this emerging style of technology that I think, and I'll speak for you here.
Okay.
You and I have found particularly interesting and convincing. It's in the tiny seed model. It's in the earnest capital model. It's in just the bootstrap mentality. We had it with SLP Toolkit. Now we're having it with Documo. It's just a different style of entrepreneurship than what gets talked about on Twitter and 20-Minute VC and kind of all the big podcasts.
The interesting thing is, it's more like the old style of entrepreneurship, though. People will talk about entrepreneurship on the whole is on a decline in America because people aren't starting as many brick and mortar businesses. It's like all software, and a lot of those things are getting consolidated or like destroyed. But I mean, traditionally speaking, you had people that were either bootstrapping or maybe taking a bank loan to start a company, and they slowly built to profitability and they built a small team, and that became like a great little business. And this bootstrapping movement is really like the digital version of that in my mind. Documo has 11 employees today. They're doing $240,000 in MRR, just under 3 ARR. What an awesome business. That sounds great.
When I was in between my sophomore and junior year of high school, my mom sent me to entrepreneurship camp for a week. And that's a little fun fact I never told you about. They taught you like how to write a business plan. And we went and visited a different entrepreneurship or a different founder around the community every day. And they weren't software founders or anything like that. It was, you write a business plan, you build your financials, you go to the bank, you get a loan, you start the business. And I thought that kind of went away. And maybe the bank portion of that has, but the coming up with a plan, building a business yourself definitely has not gone away in this country.
And what I love about interviews with founders like Matt, because he has completely built this from the ground up, because they don't have investment and returns necessarily that they're worried about, we didn't even have to ask numbers questions. He's like, here are my numbers. 240K MRR. We've grown 217% in the last 13 months. Healthcare is 35% of our user base. We're approaching 13,000 paid accounts. Like, he's just giving us these numbers, which is great. It helps us to understand and see very clearly, like, wow, this feels like a very healthy business that is generating a lot of cash. And it took, several years of him teaching himself how to code, building the first versions of this. They went through a rebrand, and, fast forward several years and you have something that's growing quickly and doing very well.
I thought it was interesting that he said he would turn down a 10x offer on revenue, saying that's super undervalued. I would never accept that. And maybe I just don't realize how hot the document space is. But I think the number he threw out, I forget what it was significantly high. Kind of gets to that question of what does winning look like if we were to invest in this company? One of our kind of 4 deal memo questions. Seems like very limited dilution, very limited appetite for taking on dilutive capital going forward. So if you could get in as an investor, this seems like it would be a home run. How about that? That's a phrase we've never said on this podcast.
Never do the sports metaphors. I also, I think this is implicit in what I was saying, but let me just call it out. I really like Matt as a founder. I like someone that is very no nonsense, if you want to use people's words that I don't necessarily use very often. Very no nonsense, very straightforward, very strong opinions that are based in his own data and experience, which I appreciate. He wasn't trying to prove anything to us or represent anything that wasn't true or easily evidenced. So that was a good mark for me on Matt as a founder. But did you have any other thoughts?
He doesn't really care about the vanity metrics. I mean, we got introduced through Twitter and we just started kind of talking. And I think the opening quote to this episode is his line that he doesn't see capital as an accomplishment. I mean, he's building to build, which he's not building to be out there. He said in our Twitter conversation that he doesn't even really do interviews because he doesn't really care about the publicity and stuff. So it was more of a conversation. He wanted to share the story that was different. So I love him as a founder.
What do you want to see from Documo in the next 6 to 18 months?
I think they're going from a space that is niche and there isn't a lot of innovation happening there because there isn't a lot of people funding that space. So fax, right? And he talked about how their new products are really expansion revenues. So fax gets them in the door, and then they have the opportunity to go to mSign or mDrive. Those spaces, there is a lot of capital in those spaces that you're competing against. So wanting to see what that rollout looks like, is it successful? When you're competing against Box and Dropbox and Google directly and DocuSign and all of these companies that are currently trading at infinite price earnings ratios, it feels like, and they're public companies and they have unlimited access to liquidity and capital, they can just outspend you in those spaces. So is fax a good enough wedge to open expansion revenue to keep that 200+% yearly growth? And does it need to be? I don't know. But they're obviously investing resources into those products.
Yeah, that's about all I had too. He said of the 240 MRR, almost all that is from mFax. mSign is coming in the next month. So 6 to 18 months, I want to see what they've learned and how well that ecosystem is working together and what the biggest upside to having that ecosystem is. Is it higher retention? Doesn't sound like they have a retention problem. Is it greater adoption? Is that the entry point? And now they have a user that's very sticky. I want to understand more about how that ecosystem works together in concert and what the growth potential of that looks like.
If you have any thoughts, dear listener, on Documo or Bootstrap companies or anything we discussed in this interview, you can tweet at us at UpsideFM. I'm EK Hornung on Twitter. Jay is at jklaus. Or you can send us something a little longer at hello@upside.fm, and we will talk to you next week.
That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's guest, so shoot us an email at hello@upside.fm or find us on Twitter at UpsideFM. We'll be back here next week at the same time talking to another founder in our quest to find upside outside of Silicon Valley. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please email us or find us on Twitter and let us know. And if you love our show, please leave us a review on iTunes. That goes a long way in helping us spread the word and continue to help bring high-quality guests to the show. Eric and I decided there were a couple things we wanted to share with you at the end of the podcast, and so here we go. Eric Hornung and Jay Klaus are the founding parties of the Upside Podcast. At the time of this recording, we do not own equity or other financial interest in the companies which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinion and do not reflect the opinions of Duff & Phelps LLC and its affiliates, Unreal Collective LLC and its affiliates, or any entity which employ us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. We have not considered your specific financial situation nor provided any investment advice on this show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Never mind, bro, that can't be matched. I'm lighting it on fire, used to run victory laps, and still I'm not even tired. It's all about the timing, yeah, that's what they say. Well, I'ma keep on rhyming, find a way and get it.